Hello everyone, welcome to Guess the ELO series where I would be analyzing your games and try to guess your ELO. So today we are once again going to analyze two games by one of our subscriber. So if you also want your games to get analyzed, you guys can send me your games on my Gmail ID which is shown around over here. But first you need to be subscribers, so make sure to subscribe the channel. So without wasting any further time, let's jump into it. Okay, so our subscriber's name is Richard Joshi Chess and he's playing the opponent of Theorem 1230. We do not know the rating. So Richard starts the game with 1 e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5. So we have the royal pace opening. Bishop to c5, which is a fine move. Black can also play knight to f6 or even a6 is the main move. Bishop c5, okay. Short castle. Knight to e7, okay. Maybe some sort of a sideline, maybe. c3. So white is trying to push the pawn. Maybe the idea could be to pull the bishop back on c2, and also at the same time the idea is generally to push the pawn on d4, grabbing a good center. Knight goes to g6. So yeah, definitely this is one sort of an idea, a very solid line to play with the black pieces. So I believe at least both the players know a very good theory, even the sidelines. So it's already very impressive. d4, striking in the center, takes, the bishop goes back. And now we have knight to c3. So already I'm loving white's position because white king has been castled. White is having a nice center. White has developed all his pieces. So already white is looking too good to me. Short castle. And now we have bishop to g5. First developing the bishop at the place of pushing the pawns in the center, which could be a bit more over ambitious at the place of it. Developing the bishop, keeping the maximum flexibility in the hands, whether to push the pawns or whether to not to push the pawns. So already I think we are going to see some high class game. At least white is a very strong player, I believe. f6 by black. Okay. So if black plays queen to e8 in this position, white can already play rook u1 and try to get this rook on the same file as the queen. And white is already looking very good to me. f6 by black. And now bishop e3. And already, to be true, I'm already kind of surprised by the engine. That engine is already showing that white is only having the advantage of plus 0.63. Because to a human eye, like to a person like me, I already feel that white should at least have the advantage of maybe +1. Why? Because white is having a good center. White is having more space in the center. White's pieces are nicely developed. I'm not sure what the knight on g6 is doing up. And definitely the light squares on this particular diagonal is also weak, which makes black king a bit weaker. But okay. Knight to e7 by black. So black is also not pushing up the pawns to d6. Maybe d6 looks a fine move, which is approved by the engine. And maybe the idea could be to play bishop d7, because you can't play bishop e6 because of d5. But black needs to play precisely. Black played knight e7, which is actually a good move. Not pushing the pawns yet. First moving the knight. The idea could be to push the pawn on c6 and maybe even d5. So knight e7 is already a very strong move. So I believe both the players are very strong players. Bishop to c4 check. Okay, now a bit doubtful. Like, I'm not sure about bishop c4. It's definitely not a bad move, but maybe there could be some better options. Maybe rook c1, getting the pieces onto the game, which is actually not the best way to play according to the engine. Actually, the best way is to play queen v3 check. The king goes to h8 and then play the move h4 with the idea of h5, trying to target the weak king, which actually makes sense once you try to see the engine. Though we have bishop c4 check, which is definitely not a bad idea. King h8, and now we have rook to e1, developing, centralizing the pieces. c6, okay. We have e5, striking in the center finally. Now it's a question already that whether to push the pawn is the right move, e5 is the right move, or is it wrong move. Maybe white could have played something like rook c1, which is the best move. Just trying to get all your pieces, and white is having the flexibility to whether to push d pawn, whether to push the e pawn, or whether to not to push any pawn. We have e5. Okay, so what if white pushes the d pawn, stopping black's d5, playing d5 himself. Now actually black can play d6, having very solid position, because if we take on c6, black is pretty happy because now white is not having the strong pawn on d5. So here bishop b6, a b6 is one of the lines, and like how to play the possession. Maybe queen c2 could be an idea with the idea of rook d1, but now there is b5, the bishop goes back, and a knight e5. So somehow black is consolidating the position, and black's position is a very solid position. So d5, in the end of the day, is not the best way. If white plays e5, then okay, that's exactly what happened in the game. And now we have f5, which was a bad move by black, and now the bar has given the advantage of around plus 2.62. So here I believe what could be the best idea, like if black takes the pawn, it opens up the f file, which still makes a bit sense. After d cross, maybe bishop takes, rook takes, and maybe some sort of a knight f5 ideas. You can't play d5 because of the end passen, which is actually fine. Actually, after knight f5, the rook goes back and d5, because after takes you have queen d6. And now the position still looks fine for black, though definitely white looks slightly much better because of his good bishop versus bad bishop, and his king being much better than the black king. But yeah, this could have been an idea, and this actually makes sense. But instead we have f5, because I believe why was this bad move, because now white is not only having the center, but at the same time now the dark squares are extremely weak, and now white is definitely having the potential to attack on the king side. Knight g5, as I said, the knight jumped in on g5. Okay, with the idea of knight f7, which is hard to stop, and now we have d5, a big mistake. If queen e8, stopping this idea, and now there is knight h7 check. Okay, knight h7, basically if you take, there is a mate in 1, which is extremely crazy idea. So instead we have the move d5, stopping knight f7, attacking the bishop. But now we have end passen, queen takes, and now knight f7 is also there, knight h7 is also there. But I would be extremely surprised if white went for the move knight h7 instead of knight f7. If white saw knight h7, that would be simply like, it displays that white is a very strong player. And white is indeed. f4, okay, because you can't take, because h7 is a mate, queen h5 is a mate. So f4, trying to complicate a position. Queen h5, white is being too much sharp, now just moving the knight, and that's mate in 1. Black played rook f5, but knight g5 is simply a checkmate. So overall the game simply finished in 18 move, which is simply phenomenal play by white. I don't think white made any particular error in the complete game. I'm not able to spot any particular inaccuracies as well. It's hard to spot it. So I would say white at least played the strength of around at least 2200 to 2300, at least. I would say 2200. And black overall played a good game. He tried to defend his best. Like 97 was the moment where I personally felt, like, let me take you through the game. So yeah, 97 was the moment, like this particular move was the moment where I thought that both the players are extremely strong. Finding the move 97 with the idea of c6, and not only finding the idea of c6 but also playing it, is simply displays the strength of both the players. And eventually after e5 f5, okay, black finally collapsed, because already it's too much hard to play with the black pieces. But overall I would say at least both the players are above 2000 for sure. I would say Theorem must be having around of 2020, and white should be having around 2050. That would be my guess. Okay, so let's try to check out the elos and try to see what is the actual rating of both the players. Okay, so Richard Joshi is having the rating of 2007. Definitely for sure he's much better than the current rating. And Theorem is having the rating of 1947. So yeah, definitely much lower rated. So the guess was 2020 for Theorem and 2050 for Richard Joshi. We were quite close, I believe. But it was definitely a very strong game and something to be learned from. Yeah. So yeah, this was the first game, a very interesting one. So now let's try to discuss the second game. So now coming on to the second game, Richard Joshi is once again playing with the black pieces, and Hamad, his opponent, is playing with the white pieces. Hamad starts the game with 1d4. c5, you have the old Benoni, and white played the move knight to f3. Okay, so first of all, d5 is the main move in the position, trying to grab the space, and the game can be continued with e6 takes, maybe f takes, e4, and the game goes on. Instead we have knight f3. So first of all, as we already know that Richard Joshi is having the rating of around 2000. If I would have been seeing this game for the first time, not knowing the name of Richard Joshi chess, not knowing his rating, I would have definitely guessed the elo of both the players around 1200 or maybe 1300. CD4, knight d4, e5, going back knight c6. So first of all, playing the opening fundamental, capturing in the center with the side pawn, you see, and now controlling the center, developing the knight. Perfect. E4, knight to f6, developing the knight, bishop to g5, bishop to c5, knight to c3, short castle, bishop c4. So both the players are simply developing the pieces. a6, a4. So if both the many players must be thinking, what after knight d5? Simply pinning up the knight and trying to capture it and weakening up the black king, which actually makes sense. But now black is having bishop e7, so there is nothing to worry about. It's a completely playable position. So instead, white played a4, stopping black's idea of playing b5. Rook to e8, short castle, h6, the bishop goes back, and now we have bishop e7. Now, so basically, white wants to play e6, but he can't because of knight d5, I believe, and this pin is for sure annoying. So black decided to play the move bishop to e7, going back with the bishop, and now maybe the idea could be to play e6 with the idea of bishop e6 or even bishop to g4. We have knight to d5 still, and now knight cross g5, which is a doubtful move. So first of all, can you capture the pawn over here? You cannot, because after bishop takes, you have to take with the knight, and after knight cross e5, white is much better. Because first of all, black's pawn on d7 is backward pawn, isolated pawn, and white is the one in the driver's seat. If you take over here, queen d5, it's a triple attack on the pawn on f7, and white is completely winning. So that is why we have knight cross g5. Can black simply play d6, pushing up the pawn with the idea of bishop e6, developing the pieces? Which is actually a fine idea, but black went for knight d5, maybe a bit calculation based. cd5, ed5. If I'm kind of shocked by the bar dropping to minus 1.8. So if white takes the bishop, black can take the bishop back with the knight, and black is simply winning because of piece up. And if white takes with the bishop, still bishop h4 takes, and black is still a piece up. So that actually makes sense. Knight d5 is a good move. Pawn takes. Actually, the best way is to capture with the queen, because if you try to capture the bishop now, we have queen f7. The king goes back. Knight h4. You cannot capture the knight because the rook is hanging, and that's some good calculation. White missed it and he captured the knight with the pawn, which allowed black to capture the bishop on h4. dc6, bc6, queen to d6. Because now what happens now, material wise the position is even, but now black is having a phenomenal center control, and once d5 gets in, black is completely better. So I tried to stop it via queen d6. I believe first knight h4, queen h4 makes much more sense. First removing black's double pair of bishop, and now the bishop is hanging, so bishop goes back, maybe d5, and black is already better. But white played queen d6, the bishop goes back, and now black is also having the bishop pair, and now he just needs to trade off the queen, push the pawn to d5, and black is completely winning. Queen e7 was the perfect move, okay? Queen c7, and now maybe d5, yeah, just d5 is coming in. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. If you take the pawn, I cannot capture the bishop because I lose the rook. That's interesting. Okay, but I'm actually having bishop b7, so that's exactly what happened in the game. So definitely a good calculation skills by Richard Joshi. And now finally, white decided to sacrifice the queen, which is kind of insane. Because if you try to remove the queen, you lose the bishop. And not only the bishop, you are pieced down. Black is having the bishop pair advantage. The light squares are extremely weak, and black is completely better. We have bishop takes, rook d8, and now we have this position where white is having a rook for the queen. Black is having 5 pawns, white is having 6 pawns. So basically a rook pawn versus a queen, which is completely winning for black. Rook goes to e1, black captures the pawn, and now this is completely winning. And after e4, white decides to resign the game because white is also losing the rook and the knight, and this is completely winning. So once again, a very strong game played by Richard Joshi to beat his opponent Hamad with the black pieces. Just a phenomenal gameplay once again. So I believe Richard Joshi is definitely a very strong player capable of becoming 2100 or 2200 easily on chess.com. That's his potential, I believe, after seeing these two games. So I would say Ruchir Joshi must be having around, okay, what was his rating last time? Maybe around 2020, right? So let's keep it 2030 this time. And Hamad, I would be giving around the rating of below 2000 for sure, because this game was not that good because his opponent, like Ruchir Joshi's opponent, made quite a quite a big inaccuracies, mistakes, and the blunders. If I try to take you through the game, first of all, he gave up the center, which doesn't make any sense. He developed the pieces that make sense now, and then he suddenly played, like, simply took with the e pawn, which was a big blunder, and eventually, like, he should have at least took off the bishop, which explains his positional understanding. But as he did not, this is completely over, and eventually it's completely over. He even that's over, yeah. So I would say 1967. I'll give it a 1967 for white, and black I would give it as 2030. So let's try to reveal the rating of both the players. Okay, so Hamad is having the rating of 1995. Our guess was 67 or something, and our guess of Ruchir was 2030, but his rating is 1949. Okay, so basically Ruchir Joshi's rating dropped after a couple of games, but eventually Ruchir Joshi are definitely much capable, a much stronger player if you try to think logically and play logical chess. Both the games were simply fantastic, and I loved these two games to analyze. If you guys also want to analyze your games by me, you guys can send me your games on my Gmail ID. And okay, before sending the games, make sure to like and make sure to subscribe the channel to become the subscriber. So yeah, I hope that both the games analysis were very enjoyable, and you guys must have enjoyed it, and you must have learned something new after watching both the games, after analyzing both the games. So I hope that this video was helpful. It was enjoyable, it was fun. If it was, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to subscribe, because like around 80 or 85% of the viewers have not yet subscribed. So if you can subscribe, that would be a big accomplishment or achievement, I would say. So yeah, I'm going to come up with these more interesting videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Oneshot Chess, and bye bye.